Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jess Quinter. I am the elementary principal at Juniata Valley. We'll tell you a little bit more about our school in just a minute. With me today are Lisa Coble, she's our Director of Student Services, K-12, and Christy Chamberlain, who is an emotional and autistic support teacher for us, and also our district coach. I sent all of our handouts to be uploaded to the site. I don't know if they are there, but they are at this link as well, if you would like to jot that down. So today we're going to walk you through our Tier 2 process. She needs it again. Sorry. Today we're going to walk you through our Tier 2 process. We began with our Tier 1 implementation school year 2008-9 with some initial planning and then kind of rolled out the following year. So we have had those pieces in place for quite some time, and then most recently started with our Tier 2, which we've had in place for 3 years fully at this point in time too. Are you good? Okay. So as I said, today we're just going to kind of walk you through what all we had to consider before we started, what our Tier 2 process looks like as a team, and then what that looks like in action for our students. And we'll share some other information with you as well in terms of how we identify students for our Tier 2 support, and then what that actually looks like in our school building. So we are a small district. We're located in Huntingdon County. We're about a half-hour south of State College. The elementary building is a K-5 building, and we have about 320 students, 3 deep per grade level. And you can also see our special ed numbers, our free and reduced numbers as well. We are a very small, close-knit kind of school community, so just adjacent to this is our second building. It's a 6 through 12 building, the junior senior high school, just literally across the parking lot. So we're all kind of right there on one campus. Whenever we were thinking about moving to our Tier 2 program, we knew that we had to have some of these pieces in place before we could do that. The first is the fidelity inventory, the fidelity check. We knew that we needed to have 70% or higher. The second component was that survey that we do ours in May, generally. I'm assuming that you would do that as well for your Tier 1. The survey that we do with all of the staff in the building, and we knew that we needed to have 80% or higher with that. We looked at students in the 0 to 1 range with office referrals. And we'll kind of talk about this a little bit as well, but given kind of the nature of our school and the nature of our students, whenever we started to implement, we were looking for the consistency with that office referral part, but really our students are really great kids. And so we had seen some decline in terms of office referrals, but we were really looking for a consistent program to be able to use with all of them too. So as we mentioned, kind of using that school-wide data consistently, and having a consistent system in place as well for handling our referrals. The other pieces that we needed to have in place were our Tier 2 team and what that looks like. Lisa will talk a little bit about who is on our team, but we have several members who are kind of those crossover members between our Tier 1 and our Tier 2 team, along with some of our staff who really have an expertise in terms of behaviors and how to address those with students. Kind of those other Tier 1 pieces, the consistent practices that we're doing in classrooms, and we're sure that we are doing that in all classrooms in terms of our lessons and the way that we respond to behavior, and of course access to district level support. So prior to starting our Tier 1 program, we knew that we needed to have a couple of pieces in place, actually a lot of pieces in place, but one of them was that we knew that if we really wanted it to work, we needed to find a solid district coach and a school level coach, and that we needed to give them some time and support to be able to do that. So since we had started, our Tier 1 coach has changed a couple of times in terms of who that is, but we have always allotted a chunk of time in their daily schedule. Sometimes it's a half hour, sometimes it's an hour every other day, whatever that looks like, but we knew that we needed to have that in place in order to really help the program move forward. Of course, district level support for any of those implementation costs and training days. We work very closely with our PTO. both in terms of them volunteering at our celebrations and our events, and also in terms of them donating things to us, both prizes, snacks, all of those pieces as well. And then, of course, the key two items, looking at the composition of our team, was it really reflective of a wide range of our school staff who knew a lot of our students, and then how could we also build teacher buy-in whenever we started. So I feel at this point in time we've really done that with our Tier 1. It's just kind of the way we work at this point. And then moving into that Tier 2 process, looking a little bit at how that would look different in terms of the way that we support our students.
I'm just going to touch base real quick on what our Tier 1 team looks like. As Jess had said, there is a lot of crossover between the two teams. Whenever, and some of you probably know, whenever you're in a small district, you wear a lot of hats. And so we have a lot of people that are on Tier 1, Tier 2. I'm a K-12 person, so I'm over in the high school doing some things. So I'll just touch base on what our current Tier 1 team, what it does and what it looks like. We meet one time per month. And one day in the summer, we have found that the one day in the summer is really beneficial because we can kind of get a lot of things organized for the upcoming school year. It's our district coach, which is Christy, and then our building level coach in the elementary is actually our PE teacher. And as Jess had said, she has some time allotted in her schedule to help to be able to get things prepared, and she does a fantastic job with that. It's both myself and Jess are both on the Tier 1 team, and then about 2 years ago what we decided to do was make committees. So we have the team, but then we also have these, I guess, subcommittees that meet. And in the teacher contract, the teachers have to stay after school one time a month, and they're put on different committees. So we have a family reading night committee, we have a thing called Valley Day, and that's a committee. And then we have our SWIBS committee that meets one time a month after school, and they do student recognitions, teacher recognitions, celebrations, and kickoff assemblies. And those one time a month is traded off for an in-service day, so they get like a trade day for that. But we have found that extremely helpful because it takes a lot of time away from the time that the Tier 1 team, whenever we were meeting, we kind of just say, give us a report of what the committee is doing, and then, you know, that meeting is not nearly as long as what it would necessarily have to be. So we have found that to be very beneficial. This picture is of our Tier 1 and Tier 2 team combined. So our Tier 2 team is Christy, the district coach, Jess, the principal, myself, director of student services. We have a K-12 school social worker. She's on the team. Our school psychologist is on the team. The school nurse is on the team, and we also, she's missing from this slide, but we also have another special education teacher that's on the team as well. So that's who is currently on our Tier 2 team. So one of the things that we, I would say, found to be one of the challenges whenever we were thinking about starting Tier 2 is how we were going to have Tier 2 but also meet all the same requirements that we had to for elementary SAP. And we decided that we were going to combine them because if not, you would have a meeting, you know, twice a week for all of the other meetings that you have to have. So we were trying to find a way to be able to combine the two processes so that we were only meeting once. And so all of the team members that are on our Tier 2 team are SAP trained. And I'll talk a little bit, we'll be able to see how we combined the forms and things like that. But that was able to help us also cut down on meeting times by combining those two processes together. So we meet twice a month after school. And what we do is we have an agenda, but the agenda is the previous meeting notes. So we don't develop a new agenda for each meeting. It's kind of what did we talk about last time, and then we just add on. And this is actually something new that we started this year with the notes. So they're all on a Google Drive, and then as the weeks go on, so in between meetings, if there has been an update on a kid, an office referral on a kid, you know, something happened, the parent called in, this happened, maybe the social worker met with them and this happened, what we do is we have this ongoing, agenda with notes where we can go in and type things that whenever we come to the meetings, it has already been shared with everybody. So if the social worker goes in and says, this student got an office referral, I met with him, she goes in and types that in so that whenever we get to the meeting, we already know that that has happened. We all get an email, hey, social worker added to your agenda. We can go in and see what was added. Maybe we need to follow up on it as administration or something like that. So that has been very helpful. It also is very helpful with keeping on task during meetings. We have found that our meetings have gotten shorter. So during the meetings, we pull up the note page. I'm the person who is the note taker. And I'll just say, okay, next kid. And we talk about it, okay, next kid. You're not talking about the same, we're not staying on the same kid for, 25 minutes. It's a very quick, we're going through the meetings, we've been able to cut those down. We have found that to be very helpful. And also during those meetings, any person on the team can bring new referrals to the table. So even if it hasn't been a formal referral with our referral form, if there has been something that myself has encountered or Christy has encountered that a teacher has brought to our attention, we'll bring that student up, we'll add them to the agenda, or the notes, I guess you could say, and then we talk about them and see how we can best help them, and if we need to provide immediate supports, or if we need to have the teacher fill out the referral form, and we just kind of base those decisions on that. We also do follow-up emails to teachers. So say there was a student who was referred and we go through the form and we say, okay, maybe the teacher hasn't made enough parent contact yet, or okay, the school social worker is going to put them in a lunch group. We just send an email out to the teacher who referred them so they are up to date also on what's going on with the student, so they at least know that we're talking about them during the meeting and we're taking some action on them as well. Okay.
So when we are identifying our students that we need to consider a little more carefully for Tier 2, we use the universal screener. This is one that is pretty, I think, widely used. The link is here for it. It's a free download. And we have it at this point just set up at the beginning of the year for the entire year for those grades with K through 5. And I'll show you a little bit what that looks like. But essentially what it asks the teachers to do is to rate each of the students in their classroom according to how frequently those behaviors occur. So it's broken into both externalizing behaviors and internalizing behaviors. These are the ones that we kind of inherently know because we see them a lot. And again, like I said, it's just a quick, I look at this kid, do they do this, do they do this, do they do this, do they do this, and it rate them in that way. And a lot of times we're able to look at these, or they're kind of already on our radar. So sometimes whenever we look at this as a Tier 2 team, we think, oh, okay, yep, we knew that kid was going to come up, and we can look at that too. The second piece is the internalizing behaviors, and I think as a team we found that adding this component to our screener was more beneficial because these are sometimes not the kinds of behaviors that we see on a consistent basis. They're not kind of those outward type of behaviors. And so, there may be a student who appears to be doing fine and who appears to be having good relationships with others, and then the teacher says, oh, I've noticed that really all of a sudden they become very withdrawn, or they're very, kind of off on their own. So these are some things that really help us, I feel, as a team to really look at students and to think about how we can best help them through our Tier 2 services. So this is what the screener actually looks like. So all of the students are listed on this left-hand side. And again, the teacher just kind of goes through and does a quick rating of all of them. And then we can look at those to see where the students lie. So if they have 0 to, I believe it is 3 points, they would be a green. So that would be really not any significant areas of concern. At 4, it turns to yellow, so that's kind of the caution. We need to look a little bit closer, and I think it is 9 maybe when they turn red. So we know that that's a student who is really struggling. And honestly, sometimes we look at this and say, we have a student who got a 3 in low academic achievement. Well, we already know that. We know what we're already doing for that student. So we just ask teachers to really fill these out as honestly as they can, as accurately as they can, so that we really are able to look at those students a little bit more. These are some of the forms that we use, and I'll actually back out and show you what some of these look like. But this really just kind of helps us keep on track in terms of our process and the students that we are providing additional interventions to. So let me just back out so I can show you these a little bit. So if a student comes up on our screener and we decide through our Tier 2 team that we're going to examine that a little bit closer and think about what it is that we can do. This is just kind of the process form that keeps us on track. So, can you see that clearly enough? So it keeps track of when we got the referral, when it was received. We keep track of what our decision is going to be, when we get permission from the parents. Sometimes we'll say we need some more information and we're going to do a classroom observation. So we go collect that, put it in there as well. There's a spot for the date for that. Any additional forms that we need, and then what the recommendation would be for that student. We also track then when we put that recommendation or that Tier 2 support in place for the student so that we can evaluate it at the end of 6 weeks or so to determine if it's still necessary for that student. So this is just kind of the process that we go through and the form that we use to make sure that we're on track with getting things done. This form then is the nomination form that we use. And the homeroom teacher generally fills out most of this information. So are we looking at the student for an academic referral or a social emotional referral? We always look at what are the student's current strengths, what parent contact has been made. This one then, because as Lisa was saying, we kind of combined both our child study team with our SAB team. So this one really looks then at all of those pieces to really give us a picture of the whole student. So we look at how they're performing on our grade level assessments within the classroom. We look at what interventions or accommodations are already being provided, and teachers do a lot of good things before they refer students to our Tier 2, so we keep track of that. We keep track of math in here as well. Let me scoot down a little bit more. Nothing, I'm just moving down. So we kind of look at all those academic pieces, but then we also look at where are they kind of socially and emotionally. What do their behaviors look like in the school building as well. So this is really that place where we try to gather as much information about the students as we can. So this one looks at kind of frequency of behaviors, what kind of behaviors, where do they occur, to really give us, like I said, some more specific information on those students and the kinds of things that teachers are already doing to help them out. So that's what that one looks like. And then what we have found, because the homeroom teacher generally does this form, and this should be in that folder on that link as well for you, is that we sometimes need some other information too to get a better picture of the student. So this is a form that the nurse fills out. Have they passed their screeners? Are there any additional concerns? Do they come to the nurse all the time? What kind of complaints do they have? So this form just kind of keeps track of that for the student, any pertinent health information. And then one of the other forms that we use really gets some information from the other people with whom the student would interact during the school day. So this is just kind of does the student exhibit behaviors in your area? Do you have any other concerns? Have you given the student an office referral? And this is a form that we would use with our specialist teachers, maybe with another grade level teacher who would be responsible for that student at lunch or recess, maybe a Title I teacher, a special ed teacher. So we are really trying to gather information on our students in all of those different settings. So we have all of that together for them. And then, like I had said, another form that we sometimes use is a behavior observation form. And sometimes we just find that we need some more information on a student about, maybe off-task behaviors or disruptive behaviors. And we'll kind of split those up based upon the time of day that is a concern or the subject area that is a concern. And we'll go to the classroom and do an observation on the student as well.
I'm going to talk about the student supports that we use through our Tier 2 program. We'll talk about check-in, check-out, peer partnerships, universal behavior plans, social skills groups, lunch groups, and some other supports. And then Lisa will tell you a little bit about our sensory room. We started with check-in, check-out as one of our initial supports. Now we've kind of changed it in some ways. We have a traditional check-in, check-out that a student can be put in. In that case, they meet with a teacher in the morning or any staff member, kind of talk about their goals for the day, what their day is going to look like, and then they check out with them in the afternoon and just kind of relook at how the day went and make sure it went well. Like I said, it can be a teacher, a para, any other school staff member. Students can have a form that is filled out during the day that they can take back to the person they're checking in with if we think that they can't or won't verbalize how their day went. We noticed that sometimes one of the problems that got kids' days off to a bad start was homework. It wasn't done, and it just was the initial bad thing that happened that turned the whole day that way. So we've kind of changed our check-in, check-out process to some kids just meet with somebody in the morning and do their homework real quick. We found that one of the biggest homework assignments that wasn't done was like the independent reading, where they read for 10 or 15 minutes to somebody. That was a really easy solution. A lot of our kids go to breakfast, so they get a grab-and-go breakfast. They go with whoever's working with them that morning. They complete whatever homework assignment it is, and then they move on with their day. They're not missing recess, which we find to be really important. They're not having that first interaction as a bad one because somebody said, oh, you didn't do your homework. So that has been really, really helpful in getting kids' days started. This year we started something called a peer partnership. I was driving home one day from school and I thought, some of this stuff just isn't working and it's just not what these kids need. I thought they needed some responsibility, they needed some self-esteem, and we weren't necessarily going to grow that from meeting with a teacher in the morning. So we started setting up this program where older students that have been referred to Tier 2 work with younger students in multiple situations. It can be reading, recess, workstations. Before they can do it, they have to attend a 20-minute training session with me, and we re-go over all the school rules and all the settings, and they have to do that in order to be active. They meet with their peer partner 1 to 2 times a week for up to 30 minutes. If they receive an office referral during their peer partnership time, they have to meet with me and discuss that, and then they miss a session. And then we relook at things again and start it back up. It was a little sketchy this year trying to manage all of it, but it really seemed to work for the kids. And the partner, the student they met with, I sent an email out to staff of K1 and 2 and just said, hey, if you have anybody that you think could use a reading partner, let me know. Or if you have any kids that you would like us to target at recess time, let me know. And I had a really good response to this program, and teachers say, well, I could really use somebody to come do this with so-and-so. And it also was really nice. Some of the teachers said, well, hey, did this kid get referred to Tier 2? I had them when they were in kindergarten. They could come down here. I really have a good relationship. So it really started to work into like something where not only were they getting to work with kids, but they were sort of getting mentored by the teacher as well. It still needs a little bit of tweaking and a little bit better scheduling, but it was off to a good start. This is a picture of two kids in the peer partnership. I had actually found out just through conversation that they attended Boy Scouts together. And I thought, well, maybe this is an opportunity to bring the two of them together to do the peer partnership, because they both could use some assistance at school. So it worked out really well. I think that's one of the perks of being in a small school. We know things and can kind of plan for things like that. But in this case, the older boy comes down once a week, and for about 20 minutes they do Legos together, they talk, and it's really a good thing for both of them. We do have universal behavior plans. We have a primary plan that we have made up, and we also have an intermediate plan. Either one of them can be pulled out and used for a student in a situation. I have found that we usually end up making them a little bit more individualized. The universal thing doesn't always really work, but it's a good starting point. So especially if I'm the one doing the plan and I don't know the student that well, the universal plans give me a place to start and build off of after I meet with the teacher and kind of get some input. Some of the teachers will actually take those and build them themselves from those universal plans. So they work out really well to just have something on hand to get you started. They usually are never the end result of the planning, but they're a place to start. We have lunch groups. These are completed by our school social worker, and she does take responsibility for setting all of this up. During the initial lunch group, she works to establish rapport, develop goals, and she works really hard to develop rules. And the reason she does that is so that everybody feels comfortable and that they trust each other, because sometimes they're going to talk about things that they might not be comfortable talking to just her about, let alone a group of their peers. Her activities are chosen based on the goals that they come up with and what information we've given her from our Tier 2 meetings. Some of the lesson topics she's covered are coping skills, impulse control, positive peer interactions, grief, anger management, self-esteem. Just recently, though, we were talking about some kids, and we were trying to figure out what to do with them, and we thought about a lunch group, but we all were like, well, that's not really where the problem is. So she's kind of transitioned into doing a couple of recess groups. So she goes out to recess with some pre-planned games. Anybody can join in, but she has a plan in place before she starts to target the kids that really need to be part of that group. And that's been really helpful as well. One of the other things that did for us was we had a couple kiddos whose parents said no to Tier 2 interventions. So if she's just out on the playground, she can kind of be involved with anybody, and we're not pulling that kid from anything they would be involved in anyway. So we've kind of gotten around some things and been able to provide services in that manner. She does her lessons through games, interactive worksheets, conversational items. They're typically about 6 weeks. Then we reevaluate at our meetings, and they can continue if necessary. The recess thing is something we probably would run year-round now that we have it going. We also do social skills work, our social skills groups. They're usually 4 to 6 weeks. Our school social worker runs them right now. When I have time, I try to jump in and do 1 or 2 here and there. We started with the Second Step program. That was what we purchased with some grant money we got. I typically use that as my program if I'm doing the social skills group. We do some video modeling. We have a program called Wonder Grove Learn for the younger kids. It does a lot of video modeling, and it comes with lessons. And then we use various other materials. If there's something that comes up, being an emotional and autistic support teacher and her being the social worker, we have access to a lot of other materials. These groups can take place in conjunction with another intervention. Pretty much all of our interventions are that way. You can be on a behavior plan and be in a social skills group. Some kids have been in a social skills group and a lunch group. Some might be in a social skills group and in the peer partnership program. And all of the lesson topics are similar to lunch groups, and they're things that come up in our Tier 2 meetings when we're looking at the kids and looking at the referral forms. One of the things we took a really good look at this year was all of these things that we were using in the emotional and autistic support classroom, and we started thinking, well, hey, these are really simple supports that we could put in place and add them as a Tier 2 intervention for kids who don't have an IEP or aren't in this room. So we were looking at things like fidgets, chair bands, wobble stools, rocking chairs. So we actually started adding those to our stockpile of things, and when a need comes up, we're able to take those out into the regular classroom and use those as a support. And sometimes that's all it takes, and we don't have to add in any of those other interventions. So here you can see one of our rocking chairs. For some reason, they're extremely expensive to ship, so I don't know how much I recommend them. We have the bands. The little girl has the athletic band around her chair so she can bounce her feet on it or push in or pull it in. We have a fidget there. We've used the exercise discs. They're a lot more affordable than some of the wobble stools and stuff. They're about $10 to $15 on Amazon, so you can use those. He also has a band on his chair. We invested in a lot of the wobble stools. I think we have them everywhere for kids who need a little bit of movement during the day. So this was just a way of us using things we were already using, but making it wider and more universal and available to all kids.
Okay, I'm going to talk about our sensory room. This is new this year as well. We did some rearranging of the elementary and the high school to be able to provide the elementary school with a little bit more space. And one of the things that we really advocated for was to provide a sensory room for all students, not just students that have an IEP. And the way that this room works is if we get a student through the Tier 2 process that we see as a very active student who can maybe use some breaks throughout their day. One of the things that we have the teachers and the parents fill out is it's called a sensory diet checklist, and it's a sensory processing measure, and it just kind of provides us with information on what the student might need as far as their sensory processing needs go. So that is very helpful, and then once that gets back to us, we use that to develop what they're going to do whenever they go into the room. And at first, it looks like a very fun room, obviously, because there are a lot of fun things in there. But one of the biggest things that we needed to teach our students is that it's not a jungle gym or a play area. There's a process when you go in there, and there's a specific thing that you're going to be doing. And our OT, our occupational therapist, was extremely helpful and helping us with this year. She provided all of our para-educators with a 3-hour training on sensory processing and what that means for students and how to use all of the equipment that was in the classroom or in the room at the very beginning of the year. And what we do is we have the para-educators go get the kids that need to use the space. They come in, it's like 10 to 12 minutes of their day, sometimes once a day, sometimes twice a day, depending on student need, and they go get them, they go pick them up, they take them back to the room. Whenever the students get there, every student has a folder that looks like this. And this tells them, and this is all based off that sensory processing checklist. This tells the para exactly what they're supposed to do whenever they get there. There's a timer in there that the para sets, and the kids go through each one of their things, and as they're going through, she checks them off. The next day, same thing, she checks them off, just so we can see if they're getting everything that they need. And then also they know that they're not just gonna go in there and run around, crazy for 10 minutes. So that is extremely, extremely helpful. And like I said, every student has a folder in the room and they know exactly what they're supposed to do whenever they get in there. I have some pictures of this space too. So this is a little bit of what the space looks like. So there's a swing in there, lots of balls, a crash pad. There are some medicine balls in there that they hold, a balance beam, just multiple things, stepping stones that you can see. So we have found this space to be very helpful this year, especially for all of those students that you have that need breaks. And it's really, it's not for every student. So you really have to, obviously use the least restrictive first. Like, do they just need a stool? Maybe. Or do they really need to go to the sensory room? So you kind of have to, as a team decide, which is the best option for the students. And here I have a video of one of our kiddos actually going through some of his sensory rooms. He's a little bit dizzy here when he gets off of this.
Hey, Krishna.
So that's just a little bit of his thing. And like I said, it's 10 minutes that they leave the classroom for. And then they're able to go there, get their sensory time, go back to their classroom, and then pick up, where they left off, so. Oops, sorry, you don't want to see that again. Okay.
As with any new program that you try to put in place, there are going to be barriers to implementation, and we did have those. The first one was ensuring that Tier 1 was being implemented with fidelity. It's kind of tough to, look at a referral and think, well, I know why this referral happened because this is happening in the classroom. So by doing the tiered fidelity inventory every year, and before that we did the set, and then we shared those results with staff, kind of talked about where we're at, and that kind of helped us to realize that Tier 1 was being implemented appropriately. I would say part of that as well is when we go in to do the observations, if we look at a Tier 2 referral and we decide, we need to observe, we're not just looking at the student, we're looking at the teacher, the classroom management, and all of those things, because we might be able to go back in with some suggestions for all of those things that don't actually require an outside intervention then. Another barrier that we came up with, or that we had, were having teachers complete referral reforms instead of just dropping by with concerns. I would say this is still ongoing, but in a really small school, you run into people every day and they just want to tell you, hey, did you hear so-and-so? Can you do, and even the other day when we did the screener, I had a teacher say over and over again, well, do you know, and can you do this? And I said, send it to me in an email, put it in writing, because I think it's really easy to lose track of those, and we want to have the data to support everything. So we made a Tier 2 handbook that's given out to every teacher. We insisted that referral forms be completed before discussing a student at a meeting. We will not discuss in our Tier 2 meeting a student unless one of us has decided to bring them up, unless we have that form. And then we would just, within our updates, remind the teacher that we have to have that form before that student will be discussed. There have been times that students' referrals disappear, they no longer have a need, and it all gets worked out on its own. Other times we get the referral back. So it just kind of depends. I think it kind of helps make a little less work for us sometimes when they decide they can figure it out with themselves. One of the other big problems we had was making sure parent contact was made before the Tier 2 referral. I make a significant amount of the phone calls home about our Tier 2 program when we decide to add a kid. And at first I was calling home and the parent would say, "I never heard that." And I didn't know what to say because I had a piece of paper saying this has happened, and this kid needs support, and then I called the parent and they know nothing about it. So we are pretty particular about saying that the parent must be informed of the behavior before we'll call home. So we just keep returning the referral form to their mailbox, highlighting parent contact, putting a sticky note by parent contact, just something to make sure they understand how important that parent contact is. And we've discussed that at in-services and our initial training days each year. We had some major technological issues with the screener when we first started using it. I will blame some of it on myself. I had this need to have it in Excel and not Google Sheets, and I finally left that go. And now it's in Google Sheets. I share them with everybody. Well, they're only shared with the teacher who has that classroom. I do that at the beginning of the year, and pretty much once I've done that, it is a really easy process. They just go back in each time we do the screener, and they go ahead and fill it in. So before it was a mess. Like we would spend hours trying to figure it out and find them, and half the time I couldn't tell who did what. And so, but technology and myself have grown, so it's much easier. We also, when we did the screener for the first time, one of the things that you're to do is just go with your instinct, your first thought. So convincing staff not to overthink the screener, we would have people sitting there for 45 minutes saying, "I don't know what to put, I don't know what to put, I don't know, what do you think?" And it just took us a long time of saying, just put your first instinct. This does not define the kid, it does not mean anything, it's just a tool for us to get some information. So after we did it a few times, I think we did it last Wednesday, and we were probably out of there in 10 minutes. So it really is moving much more quickly now. Our procedures for tracking referrals and interventions were kind of difficult at first. I was trying to do them on a Google Sheet, and I had them all color-coded, and it seemed like a really great idea. And when you opened it up, you could see exactly who was getting what, whether they were in services, whether they were still waiting for forms, whether they had been dismissed. But the problem was there just wasn't enough room for all the information we needed. And there wasn't really a way for anybody to add comments to it. So that's when we kind of sat down and moved to that, notes page that any of us can go in and comment on. And that really helps us a lot. I think because we're so small, it's hard to keep on track with the forms and keep that going, but it really, really is important for us to do that to make sure everybody's getting the services they need. That's all we have for you today. We'd be happy to take any questions you have. These are our email addresses. You're also welcome to ask us anything via email, and we'll do our best to respond. Or if there's a form that we talked about and you don't see it in our folder and you'd like that, just let us know. We'd be happy to share that as well. Thank you.
Oh, there's a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Absolutely.
What method do you use to look at the effectiveness of your Tier 2 intervention?
The question was, what method do you use to look at the effectiveness of your Tier 2 programs, or interventions, I guess? We do a couple things. Of course, we look at the screener every time to see if anything's changed. I also send out teacher forms to have them fill out to see if anything's changed. And within our groups, we do fidelity checks of what we're doing, especially with programs like Second Step. Yes.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Can you repeat that, please, sir?
Can you just put the universal screener back up? She used that.
Do you want the link to it or the picture?
The link.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So can you explain your Google Doc? I mean, are you sharing it and then is it just teacher only filling it out, or how are you?
Yes. When we do, she asked how we're sharing the universal screener. This is an Excel document when you go in here to this website. It's a free Excel document. We just turned it into a Google form, or a Google sheet, actually. And then I only share it with the homeroom teacher, because that's who fills it out. I don't even know. I think it may be shared with the principal, but that's it. There's really not a whole lot of access to that document.
Any other questions?
Oh.
I'll just chime in on that one too. So the other piece that we've done is that the days that we do that universal screener, we generally start with like a faculty meeting sort of thing. So everyone is there. And sometimes what has happened as well is if there is a specialist teacher who notices a kid with some concerns in their space, or if there's a special ed teacher who's co-teaching with a regular ed teacher, sometimes they'll sit down and fill that out together. So it kind of helps to have two brains, I guess, thinking about the students in the same way. So there are certainly times where, or a teacher will say, I'm not sure, what do you think we should rate this? And they kind of work collaboratively on that too.
And then who compiles the data as far as to fill and take care of all that? What role or who, what position?
I do. But I really don't do anything with it. Because the screener, it calculates it all for me. It shows me at the end. So then when we meet as a group, I just pull the screeners up. Typically, I go through them before we meet, and I kind of write down who I think that we should focus on, just so our meeting isn't extremely long, talking about every single person. Again, it's a luxury being in a small school, because typically I know something about the kid, and I can kind of decide ahead of time if we need to discuss that.
Is there a link to the Google Doc that says your forms are in?
She wanted to know if there's a link to the Google Doc that our forms are in. It's on the first page.
Page of this, yeah. They should all be in there. Did anybody try that? Can you see them? Okay.
Did it work?
I was like, I think it's all in there.
Yes.
If you do grade level meetings, is it on? If you do grade level team meetings with RTI, do you do this at the same time, or do you have a separate meeting when it comes to social emotional kinds of issues and looking at the data? Just wondering if you separate out academic teaming versus social emotional teaming with Tier 2.
Yes and no.
Yes and no, exactly. Yes and no, I guess, is the answer to that one. So we do have grade level meetings at least one time per month where the grade level teachers come together. We also do those after we kind of do our benchmark or screener assessments throughout the year. Generally speaking, we look at those tier 2 and the social emotional pieces kind of separately. And for a variety of reasons. One is that tier 2 team that we've created, they're really sort of the experts in terms of the supports that we have in our building and the way that we can help support teachers. And the other one, quite honestly, is to allow for this, for confidentiality and privacy for the student. So those are not generally discussions that we just kind of have, kind of grade level wise. Now that being said, we will say, these students were on recess duty, they've noticed this with this student, we have a behavior plan, so now whoever is on duty has to take that out, and it might not be the homeroom teacher. So that's really kind of on a case-by-case basis, but I would say holistically as a grade, we do that more in our tier 2, and then kind of touch base with teachers on individual students.
Hi. So do I understand that you combine ESAP and this process to make it integrated?
Yes.
Okay.
We did, and so we look at both those tier 2 pieces, but then we also kind of have incorporated the, like that academic child study team part. And part of what we realized as we were starting to plan is that we gather the same information on the student anyhow, and so this really allows us to kind of fine tune that a little bit more in terms of what we're doing. So the academic struggle may be the result of one of those other pieces. So we kind of look at that all together, and then kind of similarly to what I was just saying, if we see that it's an academic referral, then maybe the follow-up meeting is with our Title I staff, is with the parent, so we kind of make the plan for that student just based upon those pieces. But we were really finding that since we're collecting all of the same data, since half of us were on both teams anyhow, it didn't really make sense to have those as 2 separate entities, and it really allowed us to look at the whole child in a different way.
Okay. Special code. Magic code. Yes.
Okay, let's give our presenters a round of applause, please. I think we got some great ideas. They've obviously been successful, but constantly tweaking it, that's the name of the game, is that constant refreshing and keeping things going and systematic. So thank you, ladies.